Are they basically just saying to them, you don't have any hope right now. We're not fixing it anytime soon for you. So you're out of luck. But maybe Gen Z, maybe we'll fix it for them.
We've already had a crash, at least in most markets across Canada. Not all, parts of Atlantic Canada, Alberta haven't seen that. But in, Southern Ontario and a lot of markets, we've seen home prices go down about 20%.
Hi, and welcome to The Missing Middle. I'm Cara Stern.
And I'm Mike Moffatt.
When Prime Minister Justin Trudeau talks about how home prices shouldn't go down, it raises the question, can he really stop prices from crashing?
But before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
Justin Trudeau recently commented that housing needs to retain its value. It's a huge part of people's potential for retirement and future nest egg. Now, I don't envy him trying to appeal to people who are priced out, as well as people who are homeowners and really counting on their home's value for retirement. That's really a tough position to be in as a politician. But it really brings up the question of how much control does the government actually have over prices? So let's start there, Mike.
Yeah, it's a really great and important question. And I would say in the short term, and I would define that, over, a month, 3 months, 6 months, there's not much that, prices go up, prices go down. We have, sort of a fixed supply of housing and, some of the big factors like interest rates are largely set by global factors. So the government doesn't really have that much control in the short run. But over a longer period, let's say 3, 5, 7 years, the decisions that they make are important. So things like immigration policy, international student policy, variety of housing policies, they all kind of make a difference. But we have to understand that responsibility is split between 3 orders of government who all play a role. The Bank of Canada plays a role, or higher education institutions play a role. So even that the portion of home prices that we can attribute to government is spread across a lot of governments. So, think of things like municipal development charges. Those are set by municipalities. They play a huge role in home prices, but there are also municipalities set them based on provincial laws. So it's complicated, but yeah, government does have some control over the long run. But 4 weeks from now, home prices, the government couldn't really just come in and go, okay, yeah, home prices 4 weeks from now are going to be 10% lower or 10% higher than they are today. They just, don't have that kind of power.
It always feels like you have these different levels of government, and they kind of all have the same goal here of trying to keep home prices from falling. Is that true?
Yeah, I do think that they want to prevent any asset price crash. And I don't think that's necessarily just home prices, right? I think they, would want to prevent a stock market crash or any kind of asset value crash. In general, governments don't like to do things that upset people. I know this, political science 101 here. So yeah, absolutely, that they do want to prevent the value of things going down. And I think that's why it's so important that home prices don't go up quickly, because you really can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. That once you reach that higher level, it's really, all the sort of political instincts are to not let them go down again. And again, there's good reasons for that. That if you bought your home at the top of the market, you don't want those people to be underwater, 10, 20, 30%, just a year later. So that's not a good thing. So I really think that's what we need to be looking at is, how to prevent home prices from skyrocketing up, because government's incentives are always going to be to not let them fall too fast, too quickly.
Isn't that just part of the risk of investment? Like if they buy it at a time when prices are up, like that's part of the risk, no?
Yeah. But again, the same thing would be, you could say the same thing with stocks. You could say, well, you buy a stock, that's the risk.
Yes.
But I can tell you, any government around the worpart is, if they can wave a magic wand and prevent a stock market crash, I can guarantee you they're going to wave that. So, part governments are going to do things that are popular, or at least avoid doing things that are unpopular. So
So
yeah, we could say, well, that's the risk of buying a home. But if you're a politician and you take that attitude, you're not going to be a politician for very long.
So if the federal government actually wanted to cause a crash, and I know there's a lot of people who are hoping to get into the housing market and they think, okay, there might be a crash at some point and that's the chance to get in. If they wanted to make that happen, to kind of restore it to what would be considered affordable based on like incomes, would they have the power to do that?
Well, I guess I'm going to annoyingly answer your question with the question. So what do you mean by a crash? What do you have in mind there?
I think when a lot of people are talking about hoping for home prices to crash, people who are trying to get in, they're hoping to get back to a point where the median household income could afford a median home. So I don't know when that was. And that may be, I always think back to like 2016, 2018 kind of seems to be when things started really taking off way too fast. Maybe around then. Those are like that'd be like a 50% drop though, right?
Well, yeah, you'd be looking at something massive. I would tend to think of a crash of anything that's over 10%. And you look at that, we've already had a crash, at least in most markets across Canada. Not all, parts of Atlantic Canada, Alberta haven't seen that. But in, Southern Ontario and a lot of markets, we've seen home prices go down about 20% from their peak. So, to answer the question, could government engineer a crash? Be really hard to do. I don't see how it could do that overnight. Maybe some kind of I don't know, some kind of all of a sudden some big tax on pre-existing ownership of homes. Perhaps that would make a difference. I would actually argue that the federal government's reduction in the number of international students has been the most transformative demand side measure we've seen from any order of government in decades. I can't think of the last time there's been something that large. I think we might have to go back to the Great Depression. But if we look at the actual change, the thing that's caused, yeah, rents are down a little bit in some markets. And part of that is because we haven't seen the reduction in the number of international students yet, right? There's been an announcement, but it's going to take time to work through the system. And I think that's one of the important things. And anything that government doesn't affect the market overnight, right? Because there's a whole sort of process involved. So I don't think the government could engineer a crash, or at least an immediate crash, if it wanted to.
The suggestions that I see a lot are things like really limit how many homes people can buy, or they could do things like not let you take your first home, borrow money from your first home in a HELOC and buy another home, or they could require that each subsequent home you buy requires a higher down payment. Like just basically make it more difficult to buy homes, especially get rid of the things that allow you to make it easier to buy more homes after you bought your first home.
Yeah, but why would that cause home prices to crash?
Because you severely limit demand then.
Yeah, but why would prices go down? I could see the argument that might prevent prices from going up. But like for anything, like if I know I can't buy another home, right, as an investor, then the last thing I'm going to do is sell my existing homes. Now, if I went around going, I'm going to punch you in the nose if you don't sell your home, then that might that might get home prices on the. But for home prices to crash, you would basically need some mechanism that causes people to put their home on the market, and it's hard to see what that would be. Particularly again because people also need somewhere to live and renters need somewhere to live. So that's what the mechanism would have to be. Like you would have to find something to cause people to dump some asset, and telling people like, hey, you're never going to be able to buy that asset again. You're going to get the opposite reaction. You're actually going to hoard that thing.
I guess if you had some sort of like some tax that would then come into play for people who own multiple properties to try to incentivize them to sell, which of course there's a side of what happens to renters. And I know that that's a whole other part of the conversation, which some people will say, government could end up running a lot of rentals, or you could have there's so many different ways that you can do it. But that's one way that people would suggest it, is that you can put in rules that would make it really expensive to have many homes.
Yeah. So basically you would need to have some kind of mechanism not to prevent people from buying homes, because and which could have an effect, but that's kind of a longer term effect. You need to have some kind of mechanism to cause people to sell the homes that they already have. Um, and yeah, you could do that through some kind of immediate tax, um, but think of the political outcome there. That basically, you're basically driving down an asset value that 2/3 of adults own and about 3/4 of voters
2/3 of adults
own.
don't own. 2/3 of households have
Two,
someone in the household who owns a home. I'm
right,
very
right.
picky about that stat.
Okay, it's 2/3 of households, but still, I think most people, those homes are. Let's take a married couple. I mean, either that's jointly owned or, well, it essentially would be jointly owned, right? It's joint property, but
I just think about
basically,
the
like,
30-year-old who can't move out because they can't afford a home, and that they're considered a homeowner under that stat, and that's why I'm like, nope, that's not right.
fair enough, fair enough. But still, you're annoying the majority of people in the country, and they're also disproportionately the people who vote, right? Um, it would be a good sort of mechanism to go into political oblivion of again, just annoying or harassing voters. It's just I can't see the political benefit.
The flip side of it is, if the market conditions are such that, you talked about demand is going down based on international students. If we see that home prices are going down, which I don't think they are right now, but if they were, could the government engineer the prices to stay flat?
Yeah, well, I think that's more of a longer term play, but I think that's what we should be focusing on, is preventing these home price spikes in the first place. Because it's, as we just discussed for the last few minutes, it's really hard to put that toothpaste back into the tube, right? So I think we do need to find ways to make sure that we don't have these big supply demand imbalances. So first of all, that's allowing um, supply to grow over time, right? So it's a number of reforms to allow, missing middle housing. I have to put in the name of the podcast there. A number of ways to look at the tax system, make sure development charges don't get out of hand, and so on. And then secondly, it's making sure that on the population growth demand side, that our immigration policies and our international student policies are aligned with our housing policies. If we're going to double immigration targets, which we've done in this country, we need to figure out how to double housing supply. Government never did that. If we're going to cause international student enrollment to go up 10 or 20x in some communities, like it did in Kitchener-Waterloo, we need to make sure that the amount of new student housing goes up 10 to 20x. And we didn't do that. So I think, yes, on the demand and supply side, absolutely, there are policies that we should put into place. And I think that's what we need to focus on, is how do we not let things get out of hand, rather than allowing things to get out of hand and go, oh, okay, how do we clean up this mess? Because you really can't.
If we want to return to affordability but avoid a crash, are you basically just saying, it sounds like what I hear when they say that is, we're going to try to keep prices flat and give time for incomes to catch up? And I think, oh, well, that's going to take a decade or more. Um, are they basically just saying to people who are, millennials who can't afford a home right now, who are in the, their family, the years where they're making a family potentially, like, are they basically just saying to them, you don't have any hope right now. We're not fixing it anytime soon for you. So you're out of luck. But maybe Gen Z, maybe we'll fix it for them.
Yeah, well, and this is why I think it's so absolutely dangerous for governments and politicians to be talking about prices, because that is essentially what they are saying, and I don't think that's necessarily a, a great message. I don't think governments should be focusing on price or even talking about price. I think government should be focusing on how to correct supply demand imbalances. I just don't see what benefit is gained by politicians talking about the price side. I
You
think they're
see, that's
much
why journalists
more.
like to ask them about it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask you about that because you have far more communications expertise than I ever will. So I have to ask because this isn't the first time a member of the federal Liberal government has made this kind of comment about keeping prices up. And as an economist, but more so as just an average Gen X voter, I can't figure out what the heck is going on. So like, why would they? Why would they open that door? Why would they keep saying these things?
I don't know why they answer the question. I get why journalists ask the question because they're seeing all these policies, and they're like, we need to find out like what's actually going to happen. What's your goal here? And I always think that's a great question. I've asked two housing ministers that question before, or I guess one of them wasn't a housing minister, but was the minister responsible for housing before there was a housing minister. And I always think it's a great question to ask because I want to know like, are you actually trying to make it more affordable? And I know that there's other ways to make it affordable, but like for people right now who are struggling, is that actually the goal here? And that's why I always would want to ask the question. I guess like when they're answering it, if they're answering it directly, like I appreciate that so much as a journalist, if they'll actually answer it and say what they mean. But it is as a comms, when you look at it from a comms angle, it's like, that's not a no-win because like, there's no way for them to get away with saying we want to keep prices up without some people hearing, well, I'm screwed. I guess I should like leave Canada. I don't know. And then if they say that they want prices to come down, that'll be like uproar, of course. And it's one of these weird things where I'm like, I could see the opposition capitalizing on this and saying this is like making a little attack ad or even just like a social media clip of it saying, look, he doesn't want home prices to become more affordable. He doesn't want home prices to come down. But they also don't want to say that either.
We haven't seen an attack ad like that. It's actually been very noticeable that after these comments that none of the opposition parties really highlighted these comments
because they don't want to be seen as someone who wants to lower prices or someone who wants to keep prices up. Like if they can keep it murky, that's the political win for them, where everyone can like look at their policies and hopefully see that they're working for them. Like that's what they'll see in the policies, whether or not it's true.
Yeah, no, I think so. And if I'm critical of the prime minister here, he did the classic, the one thing you do not do as a politician, which is to tell the truth.
Meanwhile, I was like, good
it.
on him for actually being honest about it. Like, yes, it's frustrating. Yes, that, and I hear that. I'm like, I mean, I own a home. I guess financially, I shouldn't want home prices to go down, but I'm kind of like worried for society. And I'm like, I feel like they need to go down. Otherwise, we're like, we need incomes to really catch up. And I just don't see that happening anytime soon. Maybe that'd be nice. But I just don't know how that'll happen. And so I think that it's one of those things that when they say it, I'm really grateful that he actually put out there what he's trying to do, that he's trying to restore affordability without lowering prices. But it was probably not a great day for him and his comms team.
Yeah, I think, if they could put that toothpaste back in the tube, the analogy I keep using, I think they may want to. But I think there's an erroneous belief out there. I think there's an erroneous belief that homeowners want and expect and demand home prices to go up. And I actually don't think that's true. And I don't think that's the problem. I think it's more of a behavioral economics issue that they don't want things to go down, right? That loss aversion, this concept in behavioral economics, is very, very powerful. So I think what government should be looking at is making sure that they have the supply and demand conditions in place such that home prices don't skyrocket up. And I think homeowners would be happy at that. Like, look, if I get back what I paid for this place, 20 years from now, if I get back what I paid for this place, I'll be happy. I'll be fine. It'd be, yeah, I would have made more money putting it into stock market bonds or whatever, but you can't live in the stock market or bonds, or the bond market or wherever. So as a forced savings vehicle, if the value of this place goes up at about the rate of inflation or even a little bit less, I'm fine. That's all we kind of ask for. I don't think homeowners really expect prices to skyrocket. I think they're just asking for things not to crash.
Thank you so much for watching and listening, and thanks as always to our producer, Meredith Martin.
And if you have any burning economics or housing questions or want to tell us why we're wrong about homeowners, please feel free to reach out to us at missingmiddlepodcast@gmail.com.
And we'll see you next time.